Mike Pache joins as well this morning. Hello, Michael.
Hello, hello. A lot going on, Ron.
Yeah, we do. Hey, let's jump right into our Zoom interview this morning. Rebecca Grant with the Lexington Institute joins this morning. Hi, Rebecca.
Good morning.
All right, we see you frequently on Fox News Channel, and we appreciate you giving us a little bit of time today and some of your perspective. Mike and I both want to jump in with a series of questions. But number one, how is this playing both in South America and really around the world in terms of the U.S. kind of flexing its muscle and saying to Maduro, look, you've got to go. And in the end, if you don't leave voluntarily, we're going to take you out.
Well, the world surely has noticed. It's a very bold move by President Trump to go in and apprehend Maduro. We saw great support from Israel, for example. I think we're seeing shock in places like China and a lot of worry for what this means for the Western Hemisphere. But let me tell you, it's all in the White House national security strategy. America First begins with the Western Hemisphere. Now, Colombia, which borders Venezuela, has closed down the border. Colombia and Venezuela were pretty close. But I think that we're seeing a pretty strong reaction. And I believe, too, that China, Russia, Iran, and others are taking notice that President Trump means what he says.
You know, I keep seeing reports that China might try to take advantage of the situation. What is that all about? What would that mean?
Well, we're always concerned about China's military activity in and around the South China Seas and the Taiwan Strait. But in this case, China's just lost out in Venezuela. The last cocktail party that Maduro hosted, it was on just before the strikes at the Miraflores presidential palace, was for a delegation that China's President Xi Jinping had sent to Venezuela. China had invested over $67 billion in Venezuela. They buy Venezuela's oil. It was part of their Belt and Road program to build up influence. And so removing Maduro is also about pushing back on China's influence. I think they are losing ground in the Western Hemisphere, which is exactly what we want to see.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I have to wonder on Ron's part with China, but what about Russia as well? How is this going to be in the mix? And what does Putin look at this, what I would call a surgical extraction of Maduro rather than an invasion?
Surgical extraction is the exact right term. And first of all, big embarrassment for Russia because they had supplied most of Venezuela's military equipment. Our joint forces, Space Force, Cyber Command, Navy with the aircraft carrier there, and land-based U.S. Air Forces were able to totally take down Russia's, the air defenses that Russia had supplied to Venezuela. So big embarrassment for Russia. I think Putin has also got to see again what firm resolve Trump has. And look, they gave Maduro a lot of chances. He didn't take the diplomatic route, and there were consequences. It's not going to be the same thing with Putin, but this does continue to put Trump and U.S. diplomacy in a more powerful position. And for someone like Putin, that's important.
What about the woman who's now in charge? I find this part of it so interesting. This is Syleste Rodriguez. I guess she gave a speech that was, angry and saying he needs to be returned, and yet the understanding sort of is she had to do that for local consumption inside Venezuela. Can the U.S. really work with her? I mean, she is part of the previous regime.
That's the question. And her ties, she was the vice president, now president. It goes all the way back to Maduro, to Chavez before him. But you know what President Trump said from Mar-a-Lago was that Secretary Rubio had a long talk with Syleste Rodriguez, and she didn't really want to agree to do this, but she did. She really had no choice. I mean, Trump hasn't said it directly, but it's clear that military action is not off the table if necessary. So this will be fascinating to see if there is a plan, and if we get more details on this, to go forward with Rodriguez. I think big picture, Trump clearly wants the oil experts to go in and rebuild and revive Venezuela's oil economy. And we want to see a free and prosperous Venezuela. Remember, too, they have a really strong opposition party that actually won the election in 2024 that Maduro stole.
I'm glad that you mentioned, the oil reserves. That was something that I wanted to ask you about. Other than oil, are there other resources that the country has that, potentially the U.S. could actually benefit from with a better relationship with that country?
Well, I think a better relationship would be beneficial overall. I think there are some strategic minerals, but the oil reserves, which are the world's largest, it's 303 billion barrels of proven reserves. That's more than Saudi Arabia. Now, some of that oil is a little bit difficult to extract in the Orinoco Belt. There's all sorts of specifics about the quality of the oil and the need to rebuild the infrastructure. And Venezuela had not been producing nearly as much as they did 20 or 30 years ago. So you want to see, of course, a diversified economy in the future. You got to get the drug cartels out of that economy. But oil will be Venezuela's pathway to prosperity if the political regime can be stabilized and if we can get the infrastructure rebuilt. And you want to see a stable Venezuela so there can be more investment there in the oil and in other types of industry and products as well.
Let me read to you an op-ed in the Financial Times today that says leaders in the Western Hemisphere and beyond will be sleeping less easily from now on. Trump is getting increasingly comfortable with the awesome firepower that he has at his disposal. How does that translate, do you think, into real-life future moves on the part of the White House?
Well, there's no question that our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, has orchestrated another masterpiece. I mean, the first was last June's strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. This one was meticulous. General Kane said, we watched, we planned, we prepared, incredible intelligence preparation, an incredible joint force operation. But I'm really struck, too, at how surgical and how contained these strikes were. There was just enough strikes on military targets to allow the extraction force helicopters in and out. We're not at war with Venezuela. This is not going around indiscriminately blowing up and bombing things. Every military action that's been carried out, whether against drug boats, seizing sanctioned oil takers, or now this apprehension of Maduro, has been done with meticulous care, using the right amount of military force, but no more than necessary to get the job done.
One more last thought on this, and just to get your perspective on this. A lot of we've had protests around the country and the world about what has taken place. Here locally, we have also had protests against what has happened. But we also have heard from people who have moved to the United States from Venezuela who are actually say they're relieved to see this has happened. Your thoughts on what it's like in that country potentially, and that type of reaction to what's taken place?
Well, personally, I can't believe anybody's getting out in the street to protest Maduro being gone. Over 50 nations did not recognize him. There have been somewhere between 5 and 8 million refugees that have fled from Venezuela. The protests, to me, there's always an anti-Trump element, but of greater concern, there are those who just want to protest the American way of life. I believe in free speech, but I don't like to see protesters that are supporting socialism, communism, and it's so well organized. The same signs, T-shirts, and messages pop up within hours. And to me, that's a worrying trend. I don't like to see that. I believe in the American way of life. And I think that Trump here has done the right thing, potentially for Venezuela. There's a lot of work to do. But if Venezuela turns out well, it will be good not only for Venezuela, but good for the U.S. as well.
Okay. Boy, we appreciate your time. Lots of great perspective. I learned a lot in the last 10 minutes. How about you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your time
Thank
today.
you.
We so appreciate it.
Thank you.